Welcome to Pushing Beyond the Obvious. I'm your host Mukesh Gupta. As you know, this entire season I'm focusing on leadership as a topic, and I'm inviting thought leaders and practitioners to come together and share their learnings on leadership and how they've become the leaders that they are. So in that series today, I'm super glad to have Susanna joining us today. So before we go any further, for the sake of the audience, so that they get to know you and put everything that you say in context, can you please introduce yourself and what you've done so far?
Thank you, first of all, Lucas, for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here today. And my name is Susanna Hasenoehrl, and I'm the head of sustainability at SAP in Asia Pacific and Japan. And in that context, we're helping our customers across 25 industries to reach better sustainability outcomes, especially when it comes to reducing emissions, waste, and social inequality.
Interesting. So I've heard you talk about the ESG imperative, right? So can you just explain what is the imperative? Why should we focus on it, and why is it important now?
Wow, that's a big question. So ESG, environmental, social, and government-related matters, or might I even actually expand that concept into sustainability? It's a big topic today, and if I really look at things from a kind of a top-down perspective, or from a kind of an interstellar perspective even, I think sustainability represents the biggest change in business paradigms ever. Enterprises are used to deliver growth, top line, at the top line and also at the bottom line in terms of their profits. But now we're living in an era where that's no longer enough, at least in my view and in many others' views as well. So enterprises, organizations need to deliver in terms of non-financial performance as well. They need to deliver better environmental and social outcomes. So that is a big change for many organizations that are drilled in the, let's say, classic, financial ways. And it's a big ask for many leaders also to expand their horizon and think about performance in very new ways.
Interesting. So as a matter of fact, today I got to know that it's 128 years since scientists discovered that carbon emissions actually increase the climate, the temperature in the world, of the climate, and we've not done anything about it for 128 years. That's really surprising for me, and at the same time, it's also scary a little bit, right? You mentioned about leadership and the role that leaders have to play. Now, one of the things that leaders are currently, incented on is to deliver top line, bottom line growth. And you just mentioned that it is not enough, right? So what is the role that you think leaders need to play today in the greater scheme of things?
Thanks for the question. First of all, I'd like to say that it's not that we have not done anything in the past 128 years, although certainly I think there have been many decades when not enough has been done. And I would say it also applies to today's situation. We're not doing enough yet to avert very catastrophic consequences of global warming, as I prefer to call it. Now, when it comes to leadership today, I think, first of all, there has to be the recognition that, these big problems such as global warming, they are everybody's problem. And especially leaders need to take accountability for that. And I think the new concept of leadership certainly cannot be limited to the old metrics. So the whole spectrum of things that we need to consider as leaders needs to expand. And I think what's very important in this context is also the time frame of things. many publicly listed companies and the leaders in many functions have been quite focused and still are today focused on quarterly results, which is arguably reasonably short term. Whereas I think that we really need to play the longer game and think about what ultimately is better for the future generations. And I know it's not easy to do in the context of this short-term targets, but I'm absolutely convinced that that is the right thing to do. But one shall ask, are the systems around us, the capital markets, and the regulations and policies really geared towards helping leaders to do their long-term focused leadership work? And I think there's room for improvement.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. I know that there are a lot of leaders who are wanting to and willing to do the effort that is required to improve things. But as you said, structural issues are there, which needs improvement. But what other challenges do leaders face when it comes to doing work that is impactful from a sustainability point of view?
I think it's kind of easy to be stuck in a business as usual scenario. Of course, there are pull and push factors, but I suppose certain sectors and industries have kind of different flavors of that. But I'd really challenge every leader to rethink what's their leadership mandate. And maybe even if you're not working for an organization or an industry that's really pushing the change agenda, I think we all as leaders can kind of rise up and take on that kind of new mandate, which might then, of course, lead to the question of, whether you're actually working in the right place, or maybe would want to consider some alternative career options if the environment where you're working is not really supportive for that kind of sustainability leadership. One might though say that that's where it's needed most.
Yeah, so you touched upon something which is, I think, very important, because this requires change in mindset and change in how we measure ourselves. It requires change in, how we look at things. So which means that, change management and leading change becomes a key criteria when it comes to forwarding or taking the sustainability agenda forward. So from your experience, Susanna, what do you think has worked when it comes to leading such kind of change management? What kind of works when it comes to managing the different stakeholders, right? So there are your bosses who want results, top line, bottom line. You want to also ensure that the people who report into you also are able to take care of not just delivering on the top line, bottom line, but also doing things which are sustainable and not only sustainable but also in the short term, but sustainable in the longer term as well. So what are some of your learnings when it comes to change management and stakeholder management around sustainability?
Couple of different thoughts. First of all, if I start with change, I think the change needs to start from within, from each of us. I mean, we can't go around and ask people to change and do things differently and think in new ways if we are not doing that ourselves. One of my bosses is always saying that, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, but it really starts, what you do yourself as a leader and then kind of spreading that. Now, when it comes to metrics, I would say that I'm very fortunate to work for an organization that also has impact metrics. So not just the top line or the bottom line, but carbon metrics and social metrics as well. So I think it's always important to keep in mind what's the framing and try to frame the things in the right way. But when it's a question of then, I would say, leading or building the momentum, building the movement, it's important to kind of catch people where they are. And I think it's fair to say that most people who are in the workforce today haven't received, let's say, sustainability education at school or at uni. So it has to be part of the continuous learning, the lifelong learning journey. Now, unless you've been living in the bushes, you would have heard about these big sustainability challenges, decarbonization, circularity, social equality. So I would say there's also plenty of opportunities around us to learn and to proactively go on that learning journey. I think it's everyone's responsibility to do that as part of professional development as well. But of course, organizations also need to provide the right learning opportunities that help people to learn the most relevant sustainability matters for the role that they're in. So there's both the individual responsibility to own your own learning journey as part of your professional growth and development, as well as the need for organizations to support that in adequate ways.
Interesting. So assuming that the leaders are willing to act on it, they are learning about sustainability as a topic. They are kind of understanding the impact of their actions on the environment.
And social matters.
And social matters. Thank you.
And governance-related
matters. And so technology today is infused in everything that we do, right? So how do you think technology can support this entire initiative around sustainability and working towards being more sustainable in the longer term?
Right. So, of course, we have a range of different kinds of technologies. At SAP, we worked in the digital technologies space predominantly. But, of course, we also need to think about the other technologies such as renewable energy or material technologies, really kind of the hardcore science that has given us the opportunity to take effective action against global warming, for example. So if we think about global warming again as the arguably most urgent and largest challenge right now, the good news is that we have the right technologies. We have a variety of renewable energy generation technologies, be it solar, be it wind, be it geothermal, or other things that work and are increasingly available at a very affordable and competitive cost. Now, people then often say, oh, but that's still not good enough. Solar is not as reliable as I don't know, a diesel engine or something like that. And of course, there's the acknowledgement that we also need to keep investing into the capacity build up for new kind of energy transmission and storage. But we have that kind of foundational technologies to address 3/4 of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that's a fantastic thing, right?
That's true.
But coming to the digital technologies, so how does digital help with sustainability? Well, at the heart of it, it's a question of data, and insights. So we have to create the transparency about the non-financial performance of organizations. And of course, digital technologies help with that. But the insights and transparency alone aren't enough. You need to do something with that knowledge. So to give you an example, when you know in which part of your operations or which part of your value chain most emissions are occurring, you can focus there and take action. And then you can keep track of the impact of your actions on a continuous basis, even in the context of your financial performance. And one of the things we're working on and very focused here at SAP is to actually bring carbon data and financial data together so that enterprise decision makers and also people who run the activities know what is the impact of an individual transaction in terms of financials and the carbon performance. So I think it's very powerful when we can bring this kind of financial data and environmental data, whether it's carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, or other material topics such as water consumption together, and make holistic business decisions. And that's really my ask to every leader, to look at performance in the non-financial and financial ways together.
Interesting. So one of my earliest mentors used to say that awareness precedes action. So unless you are aware of a particular problem, you cannot deal with it. And even if you are aware of a particular problem, if you do not have the right metrics and if you don't know whether or not you're making progress, any action that you take may not necessarily be able to be sustained over a period of time. So you only are able to sustain it over a period of time once you are able to not only acknowledge and be aware of the problem, but at the same time, you are also able to see progress being made to solve the problem. So what you just said is the technology is available from a digital point of view, which not only tells you where you are or creates the awareness of where the problem really lies, and by making that insight available, leaders can then take decisions, which then allows them to track whether or not they are making progress and whether or not it is enough. And so that's really a great step to move forward.
And just to add to that, when we think about sustainability performance, non-financial performance, we also need to acknowledge that a few things need investment. And, of course, I understand the need for return on investment. So I think it's very critical to then also track continuously how is this, let's say, a sustainability investment paying off financially, and to have the right tools for that, to justify more investment, or maybe to adjust the investment where more impact and, financial returns can also be achieved. And my conviction remains nonetheless that, pretty much every sustainability investment pays off as long as we have a long enough period to look at it. Yeah.
Interesting. So I think we've had a lot of conversation today around sustainability, the importance of sustainability, and how technology can support sustainability. But at the core lies leadership. At the core lies the people who can actually lead us into that direction, right? So I wanted to come to you as an individual, as a leader. In your career, what are some of the things that you've learned as a leader, either from people whom you look up to or from anybody, right? So, or from books or whatever, that has helped you, number one, be the kind of leader that you are, be passionate about sustainability as a topic, and be successful as a leader in a large corporate like SAP?
I would say that one of the perhaps most critical elements on my career trajectory has been finding my purpose. And that's not necessarily something you find overnight. And I would say that my purpose has also not always been the same. There's been a bit of maybe soul searching and exploration and so on. But since quite a few years, it's very clear to me what my purpose is, and that is to create a desirable future for our children and the future generations, acknowledging that many millions of people today are already impacted in a very negative way by many of the sustainability challenges that we have. So I would say once that's clear to you, kind of everything else falls into pieces in a much easier way, because you have your North Star, you have your direction. So any decisions you take, whether it's in terms of your career or leading people, kind of flow from there. And I'm not saying that everyone should have this same purpose. It really needs to resonate with yourself to start with, and be of service to the society at large. But finding that purpose, being able to articulate it, does just bring some magic into it, I've found. And I don't think that if I hadn't really crystallized that for myself some years ago, I wouldn't be here where I am today.
Interesting. So maybe a follow-up question to that is, how does one go about finding their purpose?
That's a great question. I would say introspection certainly plays a role, but also different kinds of experiences. So just to give you an example, I started my career in telecommunications. But at some point I started to feel that, I could actually be doing something else. And since then I founded my own startup to address childhood obesity. I worked in health tech. I also worked in agriculture. So I've got a lot of different kinds of exposure, of which perhaps working in agriculture and in the context of smallholder farming was one of the most impactful ones, as I saw firsthand, visiting smallholder farmers in Asia, how directly they, and as a consequence, we depend on weather patterns, rain patterns, and other largely natural elements for our food and survival. So we don't know what we don't know. So I think it's good to try out different things, expose yourself, whether it's through work or other activities, to different kind of things. And then at some point you'll know what resonates with you, and then stick with that.
Yeah, interesting. So long-time listeners of my podcast also kind of know my journey, which has also been somewhat similar to yours. I've worked in multiple industries. So I started my career in textiles. I was selling yarn, then started buying and selling mosquito net fabrics, and then I sold and was in the industry of construction, sold iron and steel. Then I did retail, wholesale distribution of stationery, gifts, a lot of other things, books, leather products. Then I did sell telecom equipments. Then I was in the industry of, again, construction, was part of Saint-Gobain Glass. Then I joined SIFI, and then with SAP now for almost 18 years now. And in these 18 years, I've been kind of, writing a lot for about 12 years or so. And for me, this process of putting down my thoughts on a blog has helped me crystallize what my purpose is, which is to help leaders, create leaders worth following. And that's my purpose. And it is, again, did not someday appear as the purpose, but over a period of time with experience, as you said, the right word is resonance. On one day, it felt like this is what I'm meant to do. And I know that it's not an easy thing to kind of, figure this out. You need to do a lot of different things. For some, it might be that, your first thing that you do is what your purpose is. But if it is not, then I think you can actually, try out multiple things and look for that resonance. And that can only happen if you are able to do a little bit of self-introspection and are being aware of yourself in terms of, what's working for you, what's not working for you. So one question which I always ask people, which is around beliefs. One of the core ideas that I have, or one of my core beliefs, is that with new information, with new insights, we are able to change our belief systems. And that's inherently human capability. So I wanted to ask you, have you changed your belief about something recently? And if yes, why did you change it?
Before I come to that, let me just comment on another thing. And absolutely, we need information to change our thinking. I would say go even beyond that. Beyond information, we need knowledge. We need facts. And unfortunately, we're living in an era where there is a lot of misinformation, disinformation, which is spread on purpose, and the spreading of which is funded with tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars, I think for the wrong purposes. Yeah. Because if we look at the media landscape today, anyone, I would argue, with money can put out whatever messaging, like to a degree. And I think that just illustrates the point that it's not enough just to consume information, because that's been what information you get to see by default gets decided by an algorithm, by someone else, depending kind of the signals that the algorithms read about you. So I think it's everyone's responsibility to kind of seek the truth, if you like, in terms of information and knowledge, and not to content with whatever feed you might be getting, knowing that there is so much of misinformation and disinformation out there. And beyond that, I think we also, everyone has a responsibility to play in calling out such misinformation, because let's face it, not everyone is kind of taking that extra mile to ensure that kind of what you're hearing makes sense.
Yeah. So, in fact, yesterday I was reading a news article on CNN that there was this employee who was duped into transferring $25 million to a miscreant by getting him into a video call where all the other participants were generated by AI. And this guy was completely, everything was so believable that he believed that he's on a call with all of these guys, and the CFO is asking him to make the transfer. And he actually made the transfer. So they lost $25 million. This is just one example. I mean, you know, everyone knows what happened with Taylor Swift and the fake video around her. So I get what you're talking about, which is that, you know, it is not enough for us to consume what is being presented to us, but we need to be critical about what is being served to us before we can actually accept that as a fact. And this ability to be able to discern fact from fiction is going to be a very, very important ability that not only we need to learn as adults, but we need to teach students right from their childhood, just like we teach them the basics of mathematics or language or science. We need to be able to teach them the ability to discern fact from fiction, and how do you go about doing that. So that's something that probably will come up at some point in time in the podcast that I'll be doing.
And I would argue that, you know, in this era of AI, generative AI, maybe kind of the superpower that we as humans have is that intuition, that's that gut feeling, which is not in the algorithm yet, which the machines haven't learned. And if we think about this kind of fraud events, and, you know, the level of quality of those, you know, fraud attempts is often very, very high. But if we go back into such situations, and, you know, I've also been confronted with, let's say, fraudulent ask, if you go back to that situation and think about, was there something that was a bit off? Yeah. Often, you know, we get that kind of signal, but, you know, in the haste of the situation, we just ignore that. So think before you act, that kind of introspection. Do we really need to, like, just go and do stuff? Or can we actually
slow down,
take back? Actually, one of my mottos for this year is to accelerate by going slower, in the sense that, you know, go back, really reflect deeper, because I think that's so much more effective than just kind of executing. Yeah, which is tempting though, but we have to resist that, I think.
Yeah. So in fact, I've talked about this multiple times on the show. I've written about it multiple times that in order to, so it's one thing to be efficient, but if you are efficient but efficient in the wrong things, it's even worse than not being efficient at all. So first you need to become effective, and in order to become effective, you need to know what is it that you're doing, why is it that you're doing, and whether or not whatever you think you want to do is taking you in the direction that you want to go. And once you are able to define and decide that that is the way to go, and you know that that is going to be effective, then you start thinking about, how can you be efficient, and which requires you to slow down, which requires you to introspect, which requires you to be a lot more aware, both aware of yourself, aware of your social circumstances, aware of the context. So those are the three kinds of awareness that I talk about multiple times on the show as well. So only once you are able to be self-aware, socially aware, and culturally, contextually aware, can you actually figure out something which is effective.
Context is everything. And if you don't know where you want to go, any port is good. But one more thing, which is maybe my favorite, like, without strategy, I might just be drinking coffee all day. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I know. And it is not just enough to have the strategy, right? So you also need to take action. And that's where leadership comes in, because leadership in its core is taking action. It is moving us from a place to another place.
Is it? Or is it inspiring others to take action?
Yes, yes. But unless we are willing to take the action ourselves, how do you inspire others?
True.
Right. So it's both. So it's two sides of the same coin, I think. Yeah. So coming back. So is there anything that you've changed your mind recently? Need not be, but
Changed my mind
yeah.
recently. I think I found my direction. I think if anything, kind of my resolute has grown stronger. Have I changed my mind recently? I have to ask my team. Happy to be corrected and, course correct. But yeah, nothing particular comes to my mind right now.
Okay. So the show is called Pushing Beyond the Obvious, right? So what is so obvious to you, but people miss all the time, and which makes you go,
Okay, I come back to my favorite topic, global warming, climate action. In my mind, it's so clear that 3/4 of the global greenhouse gas emissions go back to energy usage. So it's very clear to me that we need to fix that with absolute priority. And as we talked earlier, we've got the solutions, we've got the renewable energies, and also transmission and storage solutions are getting better. So we just need to kind of funnel the investment there. Obviously, we should also create the policy environment for that. We should stop the subsidies into fossil fuel energy. IFM puts them at $7 trillion a year. Quite a lot of money. But that also needs to happen in a socially equitable way. The transition is not easy everywhere. So that's, to me, is like the big thing, the most urgent thing. And we should not stray, of course, from that. And I wish everyone could see that.
Nice. So before we kind of conclude our conversation here, I just have one final question. Which is, do you have any resource in mind, or it could be a book, it could be a movie, it could be a person or an advice that you got while in your career that you would like our viewers and listeners to go back with? Or if there is, it could also be one ask that you have of everyone who's listening that they can go and do right away.
Perhaps one piece of advice that's been life-changing to me, and that I'm trying to stick with, and that I also share with others, is that oftentimes we tend to think this or that, yes or no. But actually, if we start framing things differently, and if we say this and that, yeah, and instead of making that binary choice of either doing this or that, we start to think, okay, how can I actually make both happen? That is a big paradigm change for our thinking. It's often a big challenge, but by framing our thinking differently, framing our thinking in a more, in a broader way, often facilitates paradigm changes. And it certainly played a big role in my personal development, framing my career. And whenever I've shared that with other people, they found that quite fascinating and perhaps even helpful.
Cool. So that's all the time that we had today. So Susanna, can you let people know how they can reach out to you or how they can connect with you?
So please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, sharing latest updates and also sharing about things I do for sustainability, how technology can help with that. So connect with me and maybe start thinking how you can carry out your current role, but bring in more sustainability in that. Yes, and.
Super. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mukesh.
So one of the things that makes us inherently human is our ability to change our minds or our belief systems, right? So one of the questions that I always ask my guests is, what have you changed your mind about recently and why?
Maybe I take this from a slightly different angle. So, how I've changed something. I think I used to be a bit more confrontational in the past. So, some years ago, I took the deliberate decision to try to be more gentle and subtle I'm not sure if I'm always succeeding in that, but at least I try.
Interesting. And why that shift? Did anything prompt that shift?
A couple of things. At the back of my mind, obviously, there is the cultural dimension of me coming from Finland originally, and that culture and communication being much more straightforward than it is in many Asian cultures. So maybe I'm finally learning that. But secondly, being aware of kind of what has worked for me in certain professional situations and what has not prompted me to do certain changes. Always learning.
Nice, nice.